And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Love First Christians Bible Study. We are going to be studying Obadiah this week. I am Hody Johns. I am joined by my buddy, Aaron Goss. How are you doing today, Aaron?
I'm doing wonderfully.
It's the second time I asked you that. I feel like the viewers need to see it as well for some reason, right?
Of course.
It's not like we just like popped in live and like you're just here all of a sudden. Yeah, I asked him, but it'd be funny if your answer changed though. All of a sudden you're miserable, right? So like literally just talking to me is what made the day go south. Yeah, that'll do it. This may be a rather short one, although I appreciate any elongated discussions that we would have. Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old Testament. I believe 2nd John or 3rd John, something like that is shorter as far as like shortest book in the Bible. But this is only a 21 verse banger. It's a little bit about war, so I thought it was somewhat appropriate. And then also it's like, hey, it's a short one. We kind of rotate between occasionally some long ones, and then we hit some short ones. So I figured let's get one that everybody can easily read and keep up with. Any overall thoughts on Obadiah? I think it's okay to just, since it's only 21 verses, it's not like we have to go line by line on this one.
Yeah, so my thought was when I was reading this, as if we stick strictly to the text and we don't extrapolate at all, there's hardly anything to talk about on this one. But if we analogize it to current events or hypotheticals, you could absolutely talk about this forever.
Yeah. I absolutely feel that way every time I read a prophecy being predicted that has already come to pass. I'm like, they're predicting the fall of Edom, and Edom falls. And that's Obadiah, right? Like that's it happened, and that's all there is really to talk about. Historically, Edom is actually it's kind of a cool story. They are of Jewish lineage. They did kind of have their own kingdom. Tribes were a bit awkward back then. They were technically part of Israel, but they did have their own region, their own leadership. They just did, shared some. They shared defense, which we'll read about later about how that but shared defense, shared food, open trade, that kind of thing. And if you want to read about the fall of Edom in specific, there's this, it's actually a podcast, but I actually have read the book written by the guy who does the podcast called Fall of Nations. And Edom is one of the ones, I think it's the second chapter that falls. There's several nations that fall during the Bronze Age, and he kind of talks about them all together. It's interesting because they all kind of fell at the same time, and they fell to a group of people. There's many contributing factors. That's what makes the book so fascinating. But largely what happened is this, they all were battling against this kind of nomadic, anarchic group called that historians only call the Sea People, because they really didn't write for themselves. We don't have they didn't contribute mathematically. They didn't contribute literary anything to us. They didn't even, because they were nomadic, they didn't really contribute any structures to us. So historians just call them the Sea People without knowing really who they were. We actually can trace what happened to them. They end up becoming the Philistines later on. But at this point in history, they're just the Sea People. So when you read about this invasion that's going to happen in this book, this is the one that's actually being spoken about. This and Edom is wealthy, well-to-do. You can actually gather a little bit from the passage itself that Edom is in the mountains. It's very easily defensible because they are, high up. They have that they have the high ground advantage.
Yeah, as I was reading it, I was picturing like the eerie Game of Thrones style.
Right. And this is it. I actually made the picture of this. Now, the picture of this is Petra, which actually was made after the Edomites. But it was based on similar structure to what we did find in Edom. So if you're wondering kind of what it is, it's like almost a temple-looking thing built right into the rocks. And obviously, rocks are great defense, especially at this time period. Even still, not too bad.
Don't have to worry about trebuchets right now.
right. Not too right. The city on a hill bit there's a reason you want to be on the hill. That still flies. So they were there, and part of Judah, part of Israel, but of course, had their own leadership, and like you see among all the tribes of Israel, they got their own thing going on. And what strikes me about this, now that we've kind of got like some of the historical details in place, is the not just that they would fall and that they're predicted to fall, but what they did to incur the fall. And I think that Aaron, did you get kind of I'll make it blatant, but like a Ukraine kind of vibe from this, or like an Israel vibe, or like anything like that from it?
Yeah, I was going to say there's plenty of parallels, but the one that struck out to me the most was abusing and killing immigrants. I got a modern day U.S. in the border situation from it more than anything. There's definitely plenty of analogies to Ukraine and Israel and things like that, but that's the thing that struck out to me the most, is how they're our neighbors. They're in Israel's case, they're literally their neighbors, in the sense of like they're the same ethnic group, and yet they still abuse them coming across the border. They didn't even have the excuse of, oh, well, they're brown people, so I don't have to care about them. Like they're literally the same. They could share the same siblings.
Mm-hmm. Well, in fact, literally do, right? Descendants of Esau versus descendants of Jacob in this case.
Right.
And yeah, the Edomites were the descendants of Esau, and this is kind of how they meet their end. They end up becoming interspersed. The ones that aren't killed are kind of interspersed, and they do lose their tribe. Like Edom is no longer a thing; it's gone. There are no longer genetic Edomites. Like it's not like a cultural heritage or anything like that anymore. So it does, like, the prediction in here is pretty totalitarian. It is, or that's not the right word. It's pretty total, I guess. It destroys the whole thing. And yeah, you're correct. So the issue, and I think one of the sad things here, is when Israel came under attack, and what they did is, when they had agreed previously to defend each other when they were under attack, they decided to stay holed up in the mountains. This happens during Nebuchadnezzar and the siege of the Babylonians. And instead of standing with their brothers and sisters, they allowed the land to get invaded. It says here that they watched as their land was pillaged while things were taken from it, while it burned. And we're just like, hey, thank goodness they didn't at least come for us, right? We're up in these difficult to attack hills, and so we're going to be just fine.
Right.
That's really a sad thing, because you might be in a situation one day where you will be in a good situation, but that is an obligation to help those who are not in a good situation. I think your immigration analogy is certainly appropriate. I think it might not be like exact, but it is certainly, because I don't want to get into like blood, because we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, right? So like, outside of that,
is a lot of Israeli refugees tried to come to Edom, and then they were violently turned away. And so, yeah, that part. I mean, but the part where you're talking about how, they saw the invasion force come in and they didn't stand with their allies. I mean, that seems very, especially since they had defensive pacts and everything like that. It's very, what's the treaty we signed with Ukraine? The treaty that we signed specifically with Ukraine after they nuclear proliferation.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's right.
I can't remember what it's called.
Warsaw Pact? What is it?
No. It's 1994.
That got rid of Ukraine. I'm just going to look this up.
Yeah.
Let's see. Ukraine gave up
Budapest Memorandum.
I wouldn't have pulled that up. You're smarter than I am.
Yeah, the Budapest Memorandum. We signed it with Russia and Ukraine, that if Ukraine denuclearized, they removed their nuclear proliferation, that both Russia and the U.S. would protect them. And Russia slightly did worse on on following through with that deal than the U.S. did.
True. Sure, neither one fantastic, but yeah, obviously, yeah. Now here's the thing, and one of the reasons why this is so bad, and it's not, as you mentioned, Aaron, it's not really. You can pick part of it up here. It's written poetically, so if you actually read this, it's the lines are kind of interestingly organized, as is often the case with Hebrew. It is written in a kind of poetic fashion, and this whole chapter is written that way. But we do get to talking about, it does talk about how the grape pickers came. Would they not pick just a few grapes? Would they not leave a few? And the reason that is being brought up here is that the grape pickers left more the grapes. They didn't take all of them, and they gave it to Edom. They treated them as their allies, as part of the similar nation, because while I've gone on and on about how great it is to defend the high ground and the rocks and the mountains, you know what? It's not great farming.
Yeah.
So what are they doing in exchange for military might? What is Edom getting from it? They're getting food, in exchange for them lending some of their military might. And the thing is when it was their time to receive, they gladly received all the food. That was their part of the deal. What was the other part of the deal? That we step in and prevent you from being killed. Well, they didn't do it.
Ironically enough, now that I'm thinking about more and more parallels, what is the breadbasket of the world, and who is the military superpower of the world? Ukraine's the one that has all the grain, and provides all of the agricultural might, and then U.S. is the one. Am I having audio issues? I can't. I'm sorry.